The wind cut through the night like a blade of glass shrieking across the frozen streets of Duluth. The storm had swallowed everything, houses, trees, the pale outline of the world itself. Only a single thread of movement broke the monotony of white. A child bent forward against the gale, dragging a makeshift sled tied to her waist with a length of frayed rope. Her name was Ivy Mae Calder, 7 years old, small enough to be mistaken for a shadow. The sled behind her groaned against the snow, a piece of splintered plywood she had found behind the shed. On it lay her baby brother Rowan, 16 months old, wrapped in a patchwork of old blankets. His lips were a frightening shade of blue. His breath came in shallow, stuttering puffs that barely clouded the air. Ivy's mittens, two different colors, both too thin, had frozen stiff hours ago. Her fingers no longer hurt. They had moved past pain into a dangerous, empty numbness. She pulled anyway, step after desperate step, her boots sinking into snow that reached her knees. The storm howled around her, drowning out the sound of her breathing, her heartbeat, her fear. Behind them, the small house at the edge of town had vanished into the whiteout. The screams of her Aunt Veronica had been carried away by the wind, long ago replaced by the endless roar of the storm. The world had become a blur of snow and darkness, and Ivy was alone in it, alone, but for the fragile weight of the boy who depended on her for everything. She couldn't stop. If she stopped, Rowan might not wake up again. Each step was a battle. The rope cut into her waist through her thin jacket, biting cold and deep. The road ahead was empty. No cars, no lights, nothing but snow piling higher, the wind rearranging the landscape until she no longer knew if she was still on the road. She counted her steps in a whisper, the way her teacher had taught her months ago, before Aunt Veronica had stopped sending her to school. 1, 2, 3. Keep going, Ivy. Don't fall now. The hospital was 3 miles away. She remembered the number because she had overheard Aunt Veronica mention it once on the phone, bragging about how close they lived to civilization. 3 miles sounded small then. Tonight it felt like the distance between life and death. Rowan whimpered weakly on the sled. Ivy turned, wiping snow from her face with the back of her hand. His eyes were half open, unfocused, his skin slick with sweat despite the cold. When she pressed her fingers to his cheek, he burned beneath them. The contrast, heat and ice, was terrifying. Fever and frost colliding inside a baby too small to fight either. Hold on, Rowie, she whispered, her voice breaking into the wind. Just a little longer. Her breath froze in the air like shattered glass. She pulled harder, feeling the muscles in her legs tremble. Every part of her screamed to stop to rest, but she couldn't. Not after the night before. Not after Uncle Dean's words. Kids get sick all the time. Stop being dramatic. Not after Aunt Veronica's hand had cracked across her face when she begged to call a doctor. Ivy could still feel the sting on her cheek, a dull ache beneath the cold. They had left that morning for the casino, laughing their trot, spitting exhaust as it disappeared down the road. They would be gone for hours, maybe all night. Ivy had waited until she couldn't wait anymore. She bundled Rowan in every blanket she could find, found a board, a rope, a note, and stepped into the storm. The first mile had been hard, the second was worse. Now she wasn't sure there was a third left in her. The sky above was a violent gray, heavy with more snow. The streetlights were ghostly halos barely piercing the storm. Ivy's breath came ragged, her vision blurred. She stumbled, knees hitting the ice. The sled jerked forward and Rowan gave a small, pained cry. Ivy crawled to her feet, forcing her body upright again. Don't cry, Rowie, she whispered. I've got you. But he wasn't crying anymore. That silence was worse than any sound. Tears froze on her lashes. She looked down the road, saw nothing but white stretching endlessly. And for a moment she thought this might be how it ends, not with screaming or punishment, but with cold and quiet. She thought about her mother's face, the way it looked before the sickness took her away. The promise she made at the funeral, take care of your brother Ivy, no matter what. Her chest ached. I promise, Mama, she said softly, I'm trying. Then out of the storm, a pair of headlights appeared, two faint circles, distant, moving fast. Ivy blinked, hardly daring to believe they were real. The car was coming toward her, cutting through the snow like a ghost ship through fog. She waved her arms, stumbling into the middle of the road. Help! She tried to yell, but her voice was a cracked whisper. Please help us, the car slowed. It was black sleek, its lights carving out a tunnel of brightness through the snow. Ivy felt her knees wobble. For the first time that night, she didn't know what scared her more, the storm or the hope that someone might stop. The engine idled, the driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out the wind, whipping at his long coat. His face was half hidden behind snow and shadows, but his voice when he spoke carried clearly over the roar of the storm. "Hey," he said softly as if speaking to something fragile. "It's okay. I see you." Ivy froze the rope still clutched in her small hands. The man took one slow step forward, his breath visible in the freezing air. "My name's Graham," he said. "Let me help you." And for the first time in hours, Ivy let herself stop moving. The snow fell heavy around them, muffling the world to silence as a stranger reached out a gloved hand through the blizzard. The warmth inside the car felt almost unreal, as if Ivy had stepped into another world. The air vents blew heat that burned against her frozen skin, and the leather seats cradled her like something alive. Rowan lay across the back seat beside her, bundled tight, his tiny chest lifting in shallow rhythm. Ivy pressed her hands against his blanket, afraid that if she let go, he might slip away. In the driver's seat, Graham Ellsworth kept his eyes on the road. His wipers beat back the storm in steady rhythm, the headlights carving tunnels through the snow. Every few seconds he glanced in the mirror, not at the road behind him, but at the small girl and the dying child she refused to abandon. "Keep him close," Graham said gently. "We'll be at St. Mary's soon." His voice was deep, even, and strangely calm. Ivy didn't know what to say. No adult had ever spoken to her that way. Not ordering, not angry, just steady, like he meant what he said. She nodded, her lips trembling, too much to answer. Through the blur of falling snow, the faint glow of the city appeared. Streetlights shimmered on the ice, reflecting off Grandma's windshield. When the car finally turned into the hospital drive, Ivy saw people, real people, rushing under the bright red emergency sign. Her heart leapt. Maybe, just maybe, this was the place where things could still be fixed. Before the car fully stopped, the doors flew open. Nurses in heavy coats and masks surrounded them, voices overlapping, urgent but not panicked. Graham stepped out first, calling to them. "Severe fever, possible pneumonia, infant male, 16 months, prolonged exposure to cold." His words were quick, precise, the language of someone used to emergencies. Strong arms lifted Rowan from the back seat. Ivy stumbled after them, clutching the edge of her blanket. "I need to stay with him," she cried, her voice cracking. "Please don't take him away." One of the nurses, a woman with kind eyes behind fog glasses, bent down. "You can come, sweetheart," she said. "We'll keep you together." They rushed through sliding doors into a world of heat and light and noise. The hospital smelled sharp and clean, like metal and medicine. Machines beeped, voices calling codes. The sudden brightness made Ivy squint, her head spinning. She followed the team down a corridor, bare feet slipping on the wet floor, until they reached a room filled with machines and lights that blinked like stars. A doctor entered, her dark hair tied back, her eyes sharp and focused. The name on her badge read, Dr. Priya Nandakumar. "Vital," she said to a nurse already pulling on gloves. "Let's get his temp, set up a warming blanket." IV fluids now. Ivy stood in the corner, her small hands twisted together. Graham was beside her, silent, his coat still dusted with snow. "Doctor." Nandakumar knelt briefly near Ivy. "Are you his sister?" she asked softly. Ivy nodded. "I'm Ivy. He's Rowan. He was burning up. I tried to bring him here." The doctor looked straight into her eyes, and Ivy saw something there she hadn't seen in adults for a long time: belief. "You did the right thing," Dr. Nandakumar said firmly. "You saved him by coming tonight." Ivy's breath caught. The words hit her harder than the cold ever could. While the doctors worked, Graham stepped closer. "She's been walking for miles," he said quietly to the nurse. "She needs to be checked too." But Ivy shook her head. "I'm fine," she whispered. "Just help Rowan." The nurse smiled gently. "We'll help both of you." Minutes stretched, machines beeped, monitors flickered. They wrapped Rowan in warming blankets, started fluids, and placed a mask over his tiny face. The fever began to ease just barely, but enough for color to return to his cheeks. When Dr. Nandakumar finally turned back, her expression softened. "He's stable for now," she said. "He'll need to stay here, but he's going to make it." Ivy didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until it came out in a shaky sob. Her knees gave way and she sank to the floor. Graham knelt beside her, not touching, just staying close. "You're safe here," he said quietly. Both of you. For the first time that night, Ivy let herself believe it might be true. Later, when the room quieted and Rowan slept under a soft blue blanket, Dr. Nandakumar returned. "We'll have to contact Child Services," she said gently to Graham. "This child's condition shows clear neglect. The girl has bruises, frostbite. She's been through more than she should." Graham nodded grimly. "Do what you have to, but make sure they're protected." Dr. Nandakumar looked at him curiously. "You found them out on County Road 61. She was walking against the wind." Something flickered in the doctor's eyes, a mix of disbelief and admiration. "Then you may have saved them both." Ivy heard their words, but couldn't lift her head. Exhaustion had folded her in on herself. The last thing she saw before her eyelids fell was the baby monitor glowing green and the silhouette of the man who'd stopped his car in the storm, still standing by the door, refusing to leave. Outside, the snow kept falling soft now, no longer cruel. Inside, warmth gathered around two sleeping children and a stranger who, for reasons he couldn't yet explain, already felt responsible for them. Morning came gray and brittle. Outside the hospital windows, snow draped Duluth in a heavy silence. The storm had passed, but the cold had settled deeper, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Inside room 217, machines hummed softly. Rowan slept under layers of blankets, his breathing steady now. Ivy sat in a chair beside him, her knees tucked up to her chest, eyes half open but watchful. The door opened. Alicia Penn, a social worker from St. Louis County, stepped inside. She was in her 40s, dark curls escaping a wool hat, a notebook already in hand. Her tone was gentle but professional. "Hi, Ivy. I'm Alicia. I need to ask you a few questions." "Okay." Ivy nodded, clutching the edge of her blanket. Alicia's eyes flicked toward Graham, who stood near the window. "You're Mr. Ellsworth, right? The one who found them?" He gave a curt nod. "She was walking on County Road 61. The baby was nearly gone when I stopped." Alicia scribbled notes, her brow tightening. "We'll need a full statement, and I'll have to notify law enforcement about the living conditions." She turned back to Ivy. "Can you tell me about home, sweetheart? Who takes care of you?" The word home made Ivy's throat tighten. She stared at the floor. "My Aunt Veronica and Uncle Dean. Do they treat you well?" Ivy hesitated, her fingers twisted together. "Sometimes, then quieter. Mostly no." Alicia's pen stopped. "What do you mean, mostly no?" "They don't like me asking for help, or food, or doctors. When Rowan got sick, I begged her to take him. She said no, said I was being dramatic." Alicia's jaw clenched. "Did they ever hurt you, Ivy?" The girl didn't speak, but she pulled up her sleeve. The bruise around her wrist was dark purple against pale skin. That was answer enough. Alicia exhaled slowly. "Thank you for telling me. You were very brave." She closed her notebook. "I'm going to make sure you don't go back there. I promise." From the hallway came the sound of voices. The Nandakumars on, sharp and low, speaking to someone Ivy didn't know. Then the door opened again, and a man in a suit stepped in. His badge flashed silver. "Detective Ryan Hale, Duluth Police Department." "Mr. Ellsworth," he greeted briskly. "We received your report. There's already a warrant to check the Slate residence." He glanced at Ivy. "The girl's aunt and uncle are being questioned." Graham folded his arms. "Good. You'll find more than neglect there." Hale hesitated. "We might if the paperwork doesn't get buried." Graham frowned. "What do you mean?" The detective lowered his voice. "The Slates are connected. Veronica used to work for Sterling Carr. You know, the developer pushing that lakefront project? Half the council's in his pocket. He's got friends in child services too." Alicia looked up sharply. "You're saying they'll try to bury an abuse case involving a child?" "I'm saying," Hale replied, "they've done worse." He eyed Ivy again, his expression softening. "But this one might be different. Too visible. We'll keep pressure on it." When he left, the air in the room felt heavier. Graham turned to Alicia. "If Carr's involved, it's not going to stop here. He'll protect the Slates to protect himself." Alicia nodded grimly. "Then we document everything. Photos, medical records, witness statements. No gaps." Dr. Nandakumar returned moments later holding a chart. "Rowan's stabilizing," she said. "But there's evidence of long-term malnutrition and untreated infections. We'll need CPS authorization to keep him under protective care. You'll have it, Alicia said. But when she stepped into the hallway to make the call, the hospital administrator was already waiting, a man in a navy suit with the smooth smile of someone used to power. Ms. Penn, he greeted. I understand you're handling the Calder case. I'd advise discretion. Alicia's eyes narrowed. Who sent you Sterling Carr's office? He's on the hospital board. He's concerned about public perception. Alicia's tone turned to ice. Public perception doesn't save children. The man gave a small, polite shrug. Just be mindful. Careers can freeze faster than this weather. He walked away, leaving the faint smell of cologne and corruption behind. Alicia returned to the room, jaw tight. Graham caught the look on her face. They're already trying to shut it down, aren't they? She didn't answer directly. Get ready for questions. They'll dig into your motives, your finances. Everything. I don't care, Graham said. I'm not letting that child go back there. That night, while Rowan slept under the rhythmic beep of monitors, Graham sat by the window staring at the snow still falling under the streetlights. He dialed a number on his phone, a lawyer he trusted, a man who owed him favors. I need someone to make sure the Calder children don't disappear into the system, he said quietly. No delays, no red tape. On the other side of the room, Ivy stirred in her chair. Are they coming for us? She whispered. Graham turned. No, he said firmly, not while I'm here. She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for the truth. Then she nodded once and closed her eyes. Outside, the snow began again, soft, relentless, endless. Inside, beneath the hum of machines and the quiet resolve of strangers, the first battle lines had been drawn. By the end of the week, the hospital's hallways no longer felt safe. Rumors drifted through the staff like frost along glass. Files went missing. A nurse whispered that child services had suddenly lost Ivy's paperwork. Another said someone from the city council had called, insisting the girl and her brother should be released back to their relatives, a misunderstanding they claimed. Graham Ellsworth stood at the reception desk, his patience unraveling. A misunderstanding, he repeated, his voice low but dangerous. That child walked through a blizzard dragging her dying brother. You think she's going back there? The clerk avoided his gaze. Sir, there are procedures. There are children, he snapped. Then softer. And this time they're mine to protect. Behind him, Ivy watched from a chair in the waiting area. She was still too thin, her wrists wrapped in bandages from frostbite, but her eyes were sharper now, no longer just afraid but aware. She could tell when adults were lying. She'd lived with liars long enough. When Graham turned back toward her, he forced a smile. We'll fix this, he said, I promise. Later that day, Alicia Penn arrived, snow clinging to her coat. You need to know something, she said quietly. The Slate's lawyer filed a petition for temporary custody. They're claiming you influenced the children, that you... Graham's brow darkened. That I what? That you kidnapped them, Alicia said. And they're pushing it through the same judge who owes Sterling Carr a favor. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, the sound brittle as ice. Finally, Graham exhaled. So that's the game. Alicia nodded. I'm fighting it, but they have resources. We need evidence, something public, undeniable. Dr. Nandakumar joined them, then her tone clipped with quiet fury. You want evidence? I've got medical records that scream neglect. X-rays showing healed fractures, malnutrition reports, fevers untreated for weeks. You can't fake that. They'll try, Alicia said. They'll say you tampered with results, that I exaggerated my notes. They'll use power to rewrite the truth. Graham looked at both women. Then we bring light, media, press, whoever will listen. If Carr wants a fight in the dark, we'll drag him into daylight. That evening, Graham stayed in the hospital room with Ivy and Rowan. Snow fell thick again outside, tapping the window like quiet fingers. Rowan slept peacefully, the oxygen tube finally gone. Ivy sat cross-legged on her chair, sketching with a dull pencil Dr. Nandakumar had given her. She drew trees, a lake, and three small figures, one tall, two small, walking side by side beneath falling snow. When Graham noticed, he knelt beside her. That's beautiful, he said softly. It's us, Ivy whispered. You, me, and Rowie, we're walking home, he smiled faintly. That's the best destination I've ever heard. A knock came at the door. Alicia entered again, holding a manila folder. Judge Brookings wants a preliminary hearing tomorrow, she said. They're accelerating everything. Graham stood. Good. The sooner we end this, the better. Alicia hesitated. It might not end the way you think. Carr's team is filing complaints against you. They say you're exploiting this case for publicity through your foundation. They're trying to ruin your credibility before you even testify. He froze. They're using Sophie's foundation against me. Alicia's expression softened. They think guilt makes you weak. Prove them wrong. After she left, Ivy looked up at him. Who's Sophie? He didn't answer at first. He sat down beside her, eyes on the snow. My daughter, he said finally. She would have been your age now. She and her mother died in a car accident. I couldn't save them. The room went quiet except for Rowan's gentle breathing. Ivy's small hand reached out, hesitant but sure, resting on his sleeve. You saved us, she whispered. For the first time in years, Graham felt something break open inside him, not grief, but release. The next morning, the courthouse was half empty, most of the city still frozen from the storm. Cameras flashed outside as Graham and Ivy entered, escorted by Alicia. Inside, the slate sat stiff and pale, Veronica's face painted with practiced innocence. Sterling Carr sat 2 rows behind them, immaculate in a dark coat, watching with the cold interest of a man counting assets. Judge Eleanor Brookings entered, her expression grave but composed. We are here to determine temporary custody of Ivy and Rowan Calder, she began. Alicia rose first, her voice steady. She presented the medical reports, the photographs, Dr. Nanda Kumar's sworn statement. Then she handed up a small envelope. Inside was Ivy's note, the one she'd written on the back of an old envelope before leaving the house, baby sick. Going to hospital. Ivy. When the judge read it aloud, the room fell silent. Veronica's slate shifted uncomfortably. Her lawyer objected, claiming fabrication, but Judge Brookings silenced him with a glance. Then Graham was called to the stand. His voice was calm, deep, unshaken. He told them about the road, the storm, the girl too brave for her age. He didn't raise his voice, didn't dramatize. He simply told the truth. When it was over, the judge's gaze softened. We will reconvene for a full custody hearing, she said. Until then, the children remain under Mr. Ellsworth's care. The gavel struck wood. The echo felt like thunder. Outside, the air was sharp but bright. Ivy stood beside Graham on the courthouse steps, her mittened hand slipping into his. For the first time, she wasn't looking back over her shoulder. He glanced down at her and smiled. You did it, Ivy. She shook her head. We did it. Above them, snowflakes drifted down, no longer a storm, but a soft beginning. The house on the hill above Knife River smelled like wood smoke and bread. For the first time in years, Ivy woke to warmth that wasn't borrowed from a flickering space heater. The windows glowed faintly gold against the pale morning, and the air carried the steady hush of falling snow outside. Somewhere down the hall, she heard laughter, the sound of Rowan and Mrs. Kavanaugh in the kitchen. She slipped out of bed, toes sinking into a rug soft as clouds, and padded toward the sound. The kitchen was alive with color sunlight, catching copper pan steam curling from a pot on the stove. Rowan sat in a high chair, giggling, as Mrs. Kavanaugh flipped pancakes shaped like snowmen. There she is, the older woman said, smiling when she saw Ivy. Sleep well, love, Ivy nodded. It's warm here, she said simply, and that seemed to please Mrs. Kavanaugh more than any compliment could. Grandma entered from the back porch, brushing snow from his coat. His hair was dusted white, his cheeks ruddy from the cold. Good morning, team, he said. Breakfast smells like victory. Rowan squealed in approval, waving a sticky pancake in one hand. Graham leaned down and wiped his son's chin with a napkin. The word still felt new in his heart, a fragile miracle. For Ivy, days in the new house began to fold into rhythm. Mornings with pancakes and stories. Afternoons spent by the fire, while Ms. Hart guided her through lessons, reading numbers, sometimes simple science experiments that fizzed and bubbled and made Rowan giggle uncontrollably. In the evenings, Graham returned from work, sometimes weary, sometimes smiling, but always present. He never raised his voice. He never turned away. The first time Ivy laughed, really laughed, it startled her. The sound was strange, like a bird learning it still had wings. Graham heard it from the next room and froze mid-step, afraid to disturb it. Later, when she caught him smiling, she blushed and said, I didn't mean to be loud. Don't ever apologize for laughter, he told her. That's the sound of life coming back. Each week brought small victories. Rowan's cough faded. Ivy gained weight, her cheeks softening and her eyes, losing the hollow look of hunger and fear. She began to decorate her room, cut out snowflakes on the windows, a drawing of the lake taped above her bed. She asked if she could plant flowers when the spring came. Daisies, she said. They look like they're smiling. Graham promised they would. Still, some nights were harder. The nightmares came quietly curling around the edges of her sleep. She'd wake to the echo of her aunt's voice, to the phantom sting of the belt, or the cold of the basement floor. Each time the dark room pressed close, threatening to swallow her back into memory. But every time, without fail, she'd hear a soft knock. Graham would be there holding a blanket and a mug of warm milk. "You're safe," he'd say, sitting at the edge of her bed until her breathing slowed. "No one's coming, not anymore." It took months before she fully believed him. Winter melted slowly along Lake Superior. The snow retreated from the pines, the ice cracked along the shoreline. One morning, Graham loaded Rowan into the car and said, "Field trip." They drove to the hill above the lake where the wind smelled of thaw and cedar. Ivy stood beside him, her hair whipping in the breeze. "This is where the lake begins to breathe again," Graham said. "See how the ice breaks apart? That's what healing looks like. It doesn't happen all at once." Ivy nodded quietly. She didn't say it aloud, but she understood. Healing was learning to trust warmth again after years of cold. By spring, the world had shifted. Rowan took his first real steps in the garden, tottering toward Ivy while she laughed and clapped her hands. Graham watched from the porch, camera in hand, capturing the moment he knew would stay with him forever. In early May, a letter arrived from Judge Brookings' office. The official custody hearing was scheduled for June. Graham read it twice before handing it to Ivy. "This means we'll make it official," he said. "If you still want that." Ivy looked down at the paper, then up at him. "You already feel like family," she said. "The paper just tells other people." The hearing came on a bright day filled with the hum of spring. They stood before the judge, the same woman who had seen Ivy trembling months before. Now she saw a girl standing tall beside her guardian, her little brother holding her hand. The judge smiled. "Mr. Ellsworth, you've given these children more than safety. You've given them home." When the gavel struck, Ivy's breath caught. It was done. Official. Irrevocable. That evening, back at the house, they celebrated with hot chocolate and cinnamon bread. Mrs. Kavanaugh hummed an Irish lullaby while Rowan fell asleep on Graham's chest. Ivy sat by the window watching the last of the sunset burn gold over the lake. Graham joined her quietly. "You know," he said, "I think your mom would be proud." Ivy leaned against his shoulder. "Maybe she sent you," she whispered. He smiled. "Maybe she did." Outside, the wind carried the scent of new rain. Inside, 3 lives once shattered began at last to fit together. The storm was over. What remained was light. The courthouse doors opened to the smell of wet spring and sunlight on melting snow. For a moment, Ivy just stood there, blinking against the brightness. It didn't feel real yet. The gavel, the applause, Judge Brookings's warm smile as she said, "Welcome to your new family." Beside her, Graham held Rowan in his arms. The little boy was half asleep, his thumb tucked against his cheek, unaware that his world had just changed forever. Mrs. Kavanaugh waited by the car, tears in her eyes and a camera in her hands. "Smile, love," she said, and the shutter clicked, catching the exact moment Ivy's life began again. They drove home with the windows cracked just enough to let in the scent of thawing pine. The lake shimmered in the distance, still edged with ice, reflecting a sky that seemed impossibly blue after so many months of gray. Ivy leaned her head against the window, the hum of the tires steady beneath her, and tried to breathe it all in, the peace, the safety, the promise of tomorrow. When they reached the house, Rowan woke and clapped his hands. "Home," he shouted, and Graham laughed, a sound so full of joy that Ivy felt something lift in her chest. Inside, sunlight pooled across the kitchen table. Mrs. Kavanaugh had left a cake covered in white frosting and strawberries shaped like hearts. A small sign read, "Welcome home, Ivy and Rowan." Ivy touched the words with her fingertips. Her throat tightened. She had dreamed of warmth before, but it had always vanished at dawn. This time it stayed. Graham set Rowan in his chair and looked at her across the table. "It's official now," he said, his voice quiet, "but you were family long before today." She tried to answer, but her voice caught somewhere between tears and laughter. So she nodded, eyes shining. They ate cake, and Rowan smeared frosting across his face until everyone was laughing again. Afterward, Graham poured cocoa for Ivy and coffee for himself. They took their cups to the porch where the air smelled like earth and melting snow. The horizon blazed orange and gold. Birds called from the trees, tentative, testing the season. Ivy sat beside him, her feet tucked under the chair, and whispered, "Do you think Mama can see us?" Graham looked toward the lake. "If she can," he said, "I think she's proud of you." Ivy smiled. "Maybe she sent you." He turned to her, eyes soft. "Maybe she sent both of us to each other." They sat there until the sun slipped behind the trees, silence filled with everything that no longer needed words. Inside, Rowan's laughter echoed through the open door. The house was alive, warm, safe, whole. And for the first time in her 7 years, May Calder, now Ivy Mae Ellsworth, knew the meaning of home, not walls, not blood, but hearts that stay. Today's story comes to an end, but its echo still lingers in the heart. What do you think? Give us a score from 1 to 10 and feel free to share a few words in the comments. Every voice here is valued and heard. Before you go, let me ask you gently, are you doing okay today? If your heart feels heavy, let this place be a quiet corner where you can share and find comfort. See you again in the next bedtime story, where love and hope remind us that no matter how dark the night may seem, kindness will always prevail.